Okay, so in a world that feels like it's constantly being pulled in a million different directions, one summit in New Delhi recently put a major global powers foreign policy to the ultimate test. We're talking about the 23rd India-Russia Summit, a meeting that really forced India to navigate a razor's edge in a deeply polarized world. This phrase from the International Crisis Group just nails it. This wasn't just some routine meeting, it was a high-wire act with huge implications for global energy, for regional security, and really for the future of international partnerships.
So, that brings us to the big question, right? With the Russian president facing an ICC arrest warrant and all this intense pressure from the West, why on earth would India offer such a warm reception? Well, the answer reveals a really calculated strategy, one that's rooted in decades of history but is looking squarely at the future.
To really get what was on the line here, we have to understand the immense pressure cooker environment this whole summit took place in. This was a meeting held right in the middle of some serious international tension.
Just look at this slide. It shows you the sheer weight of all the external factors. Washington and its allies were putting on a full court press to isolate Russia. The U.S. had sanctioned Russian energy firms, the very companies India was buying oil from, and it even slapped some Indian goods with punitive tariffs. And right before the visit, European diplomats published a joint article in Indian newspapers basically telling Delhi to join their pressure campaign. So hosting President Putin under these circumstances, that wasn't just a choice, it was a pretty significant act of diplomatic defiance.
So with all that pressure coming from every direction, what do you do first? Well, a huge outcome of the summit was a plan to kind of sanctions-proof their deep economic relationship. This wasn't about provoking anyone, it was a calculated move toward building their own economic resilience.
So, how are they going to do this? The strategy was basically twofold. First, they had to deal with a massive trade imbalance. India's imports from Russia, mostly discounted oil, were more than 10 times what it was selling back. The fix? Get Russia to use all those earnings to buy more Indian stuff, like pharmaceuticals, farm goods, and auto parts. Second, and this is the really critical part, they needed to build a financial pipeline that didn't rely on the US dollar.
And this number, this tells you everything you need to know about how ambitious their plan is. They aren't just trying to survive the current sanctions, they're aiming for serious growth. Setting a target to hit $100 billion in trade by 2030, well, that signals a clear, long-term commitment, no matter what external pressures are out there.
And this is the financial tool that makes it all possible. They're called Special Rupee Vostro Accounts, or SRVAs. The easiest way to think about it is like a parallel financial highway. Russia sells oil to India and gets paid in Indian rupees. Then, those rupees get deposited into these special accounts in Indian banks. Russia can then use that exact money to buy Indian products. It creates this closed-loop system that completely bypasses the US dollar and the global SWIFT payments network. It's pretty clever.
Okay, so that economic piece is super important, but it's also tied directly to the other huge pillar of their relationship, defense. And here too, we saw a fundamental shift in strategy. See, for decades, India has been one of the biggest customers for Russian military hardware. Now that whole dynamic is being completely re-engineered.
The partnership is moving away from a simple buyer-seller deal to a real collaboration. The new focus is on researching, developing, and building advanced defense systems together on Indian soil. And this shift lines up perfectly with India's Make in India initiative, which is all about turning the country into a self-reliant defense manufacturing powerhouse.
And believe me, this change is absolutely critical for India's national security. A huge portion of its military hardware, from the backbone of its air force to its most advanced air defense shield, it's all Russian-made. The war in Ukraine really exposed a major vulnerability here. Sanctions and Russia's own wartime needs seriously messed with the supply of essential spare parts. That threatened to ground entire fleets and compromise India's military readiness.
So, this was the real headline coming out of the defense talks. It wasn't some flashy new weapons deal. Nope. It was a practical, long-term solution to that critical spare parts problem. By agreeing to manufacture spares and components inside India, they're working to guarantee that India's military can keep its arsenal running for years to come, all while building up India's own domestic defense industry.
So when you put all these pieces together, the economics, the defense, what's the big picture here? Well, the entire summit was basically a huge public declaration of India's main foreign policy principle, what they call strategic autonomy. It's a commitment to making decisions based on its own national interests, not the pressures of any single global power. And this quote from Prime Minister Modi, said while he's standing right next to President Putin, is just a masterclass in how this policy works in practice. He's directly addressing the Ukraine conflict, but with very carefully chosen words. He's carving out this unique position, not taking a side in the war, but firmly taking the side of peace. It's a way of asserting India's independent view without alienating a partner it's had for a very long time.
And this is how the two countries are kind of framing their partnership for the rest of the world. In an era that they see as more and more unstable and defined by competing groups, they're positioning their long-standing relationship as a stabilizing force, an anchor of predictability in a pretty turbulent world.
At the end of the day, this summit was way more than just a meeting between two leaders. It was a really clear case study in how a rising power is trying to navigate this new era of intense competition. It shows a firm commitment to national interest above aligning with any single bloc. And it leaves us with a critical question for the future. In this new age of global competition, is walking the tightrope the only path forward?